As many of you know, this channel is generally quite positive when discussing Tony Khan and AEW as a whole. I think I discuss the company in a fair and unbiased manner, while still being an overall fan of the product and while still cheering for the success and growth of the business. I praise AEW where I see fit and where I believe it's deserved, but I also criticize the negative elements that I believe should be highlighted and discussed. One such element is AEW's mismanagement of their roster. Now, I call it a mismanagement of the roster mainly because of my own personal and subjective feelings about the talent that aren't being used. Every person that I will discuss in this video is, in my opinion, a world champion level talent if booked the right way. My own personal frustrations with these wrestlers not being used comes from the very potential that I believe they all have. Clearly, at this stage, it seems that Tony Khan feels differently. So, to play devil's advocate and attempt to shed some kind of reason to his decision, it's not as if Tony Khan is deliberately keeping these wrestlers on the sideline while seeing value in them. He is the lead booker and the owner of the company. If he doesn't see value in someone, or if he can't find compelling television for these guys to work in, it does make some sense that he wouldn't use these guys. It's only fair to give Tony Khan the credit that he's earned over the last couple of years. To me, at least, it seems he's just not booking these guys for that very reason. He doesn't see a road to any meaningful booking for them. In this video, I'll be discussing 3 specific talents that were brought into the company as part of the bolstering signings in Miro, Andrade El Idolo, and Malachi Black. As mentioned previously, 3 wrestlers that I believe are capable of carrying the AEW World Championship with dignity, believability, and credibility. The concerning part for me is not that Tony Khan is opting to leave wrestlers off television when he doesn't see anything in them. That's actually very normal. The concerning part is that Tony Khan doesn't see anything in these aforementioned names. That I just cannot comprehend. The funny thing is, I have made videos on both Andrade and Miro before. For Miro, my stance is very clear. He is the greatest TNT champion we've had to date and is one of the most intimidating and believable looking wrestlers on the AEW roster. And for a roster that is overall lacking in size, specifically in the top division, Miro brings something totally different and dynamic when it comes to the in-ring attributes he brings to the table. But Miro is not just like every other big man in AEW. He separates himself from the likes of Lance Archer, Brian Cage, Powerhouse Hobbs, or even Wardlow. Miro's promo work has been arguably the most impressive aspect of his character. His vignettes, where he literally feuds with God, have been some of the best work done by anyone when it comes to post-production work. The only other things that come to mind that can compete with those vignettes, funnily enough, are Malachi Black's work, and I would also throw in the Dark Order Hangman Page cowboy entrance as one of the best produced things AEW has done. Point being, Miro is capable of in-depth storytelling to go along with his monster presence and in-ring ability. When I say monster presence, I really don't mean just his size. I do mean his presence. His aura is really that of a top guy. When I see him come out, he looks like a top guy. And I know I'm a bit of a Miro stan, but I truly believe I judge him as objectively as I can. I don't think anyone can argue that when Miro appears from the ring tunnel and does his little jump, stands on the ramp and flexes, that he doesn't just exuberate top guy aura. If you can't see it, the stan in me will simply not believe you. The one thing Miro probably hasn't been allowed to show off is what a meaningful long-term feud with him would look like. A lot of his run in AEW, including the highlight of his run as TNT champion, were predominantly short builds going into the matches. Not that the matches were bad, but the build just wasn't there. There wasn't much for Miro to really sink his teeth into and have a solid 2-month program. Who knows? That could be his downfall if he were to ever get a push in AEW. I doubt it, but I'm trying to stay impartial on the matter. Overall, with Miro, I'm really not sure what changed. Why Tony Khan gave him the TNT title, had him fill in for a #1 contender match for the AEW World title, which is a big deal, and brought him back with vignettes just to have him do what exactly? He went up against Malachi Black, another guy who's floundering. When did Tony Khan's opinion of Miro change? Was it his injury? Was it not being able to to secure CJ Perry? Was he someone that Triple H contacted to bring back, and did that rub TK the wrong way? Was it really the addition of all the other guys, or did he never really believe in Miro? I'm not claiming Miro should have been the world champion at this stage. The CM Punk, which has now turned into Jon Moxley, and MJF program should have always been in this spot this year, but Miro is only 36. He still has a few years left in his peak. To give up on him now seems really strange. I hope Tony Khan finds something for him. Regardless, we stand Miro. Now, someone who I believe definitely got contacted by Triple H and was probably one of, if not the first person Triple H contacted, and someone who I just mentioned Miro was feuding with, is the aforementioned Malachi Black. A project and a wrestler that was directly under Triple H's influence in NXT, Malachi Black, and by extension, the House of Black, was lining up as one of, if not the most dominant factions AEW would be able to put out there. Since the creation of the house, I truly believe them to be strong contenders for inaugural AEW Trios champions. They were all great singles competitors, and Malachi and Brody King actually worked out extremely well as a tag team, which I'm sure Buddy Matthews could have slotted into at any time. All under the kingpin of Malachi, whose promos and vignettes were, as mentioned before with Miro, some of the greatest pieces of cinematography and storytelling that AEW has produced. While I'm actually not as big of a fan of Malachi as the other two names we're discussing today, I find his failure more strange than Miro's. Malachi, to me, as an outsider, seems like a guy who you can give 99% creative freedom and feel confident he will find a story to tell and an angle to sell. You almost just need to sign off on his ideas and let him fly. Again, I'm speaking as someone who is not only an outsider, but has never worked or even done that much in-depth research into how the creative process works in professional wrestling as a whole, but Malachi seems like such a creative individual that personally, I wouldn't even want to interfere with him and his ideas. Tony Khan, on the other hand, however, does seem like a bit of a control freak and a perfectionist, which doesn't surprise me. You almost need to be like that to be successful in the roles that he occupies. Despite my extreme disappointment surrounding the misuse of Malachi Black, he is probably the only one of these three that I'm most comfortable with leaving. I think Malachi could have been a great trios champion, tag champion, TNT champion, even all Atlantic champion. He's also someone I would have really loved to have seen have a little expedition to Japan, but do I see him as a AEW world champion? Yeah, I do. That's why I made the video. That's why he's part of it. But it's more of a coin flip. I'm not as certain that he would be a successful world champion as either Miro or Andrade, but he's definitely worthy of having a run. And now he seems most likely of these three to leave. Whether it be a clean break or not is another question, and Tony Khan is well within his rights to hold talents to their contracts. Maybe he makes amends by giving Malachi something to work with, but I unfortunately feel it's extremely unlikely that he reaches the heights in AEW that he should have. Last on the list is a man who I dedicated a video to when I thought his run in AEW was finally catching a second wind. A man that I believed had actually survived the storm and had risen like a phoenix from the ashes when he created La Facción Ingobernables was Andrade El Idolo. Now, I obviously can't discuss Andrade without discussing the backstage issues he's had very recently, but also I'm going to discuss Andrade without discussing the backstage issues he's had very recently. Mainly because A, I don't know, I kind of like the idea of Sammy having his clock cleaned, but also B, it doesn't really take away from what I have to say about Andrade in terms of his value to the company, his ability as an on-screen personality, and what I believe his potential was, or still potentially is. Andrade, I think, is the one that's probably a bit clearer as to what went wrong and why it hasn't worked out. Actually, Andrade's only ever really had bad luck when it comes to his AEW run. The constant swapping of mouthpieces, the inability to get Ric Flair over the line as part of AEW, and the whole debacle of claiming Matt Hardy's job squad. It just gets worse. He seemed to be on the path of redemption though, as he reunited with Rush and eventually Dragon Lee. It was all coming up Andrade. Everything was meant to work out, and it was finally working out. Andrade, at this stage, could easily be built up as the man to dethrone Wardlow as TNT champion and have a meaningful run like Miro did. La Facción could easily be AEW Trios champions one day, and they would steal the show consistently on AEW television. Andrade is probably the one guy out of these three that I'm most surprised has not worked out, for multiple reasons, some on-screen and some off-screen. The wrestling community has a large contingency of Latino fans. Now, it's not like you need to pander to this subsection of the crowd, but historically speaking, Mexican top guys have mostly been backed really heavily, and not just by the Latino fan base, but wrestling fans as a whole. I'm not saying they're money-making machines, but there's an affinity that wrestling fans have with luchadores. But in addition to this, I always thought Andrade was a very natural gateway into some New Japan Pro Wrestling shows. Naito, who is arguably the most popular wrestler in New Japan Pro Wrestling, was originally a member of Los Ingobernables, the original iteration of La Facción, and he's grown his own stable in Japan, continuing this legacy as Los Ingobernables de Japón. I always felt that Andrade and La Facción would either team up or go against LIJ in either a Forbidden Door show or even just a one-off or constant La Facción appearances in Japan and LIJ appearances in America. It would be a great way to consolidate the relationship between New Japan and AEW. Oh, and of course, it would give Andrade something to actually do. His recent drama just escalates and highlights how badly he wants to leave AEW. Similar to Malachi Black, this is a Triple H project that I'm sure he would be hungry to get back, but once again I must reiterate, Tony Khan is well within his rights to hold any of his professional wrestlers to the contracts they sign, no matter how many times they punch Sammy Guevara. I've got to be honest, all three of these guys at the moment are really disappointing to see in the roles that they're at. I'm not sure how much of it can be undone at this stage. I of course am hoping that all three of these men get back on the AEW train and are successful, but it seems like a far cry to have not just all three of them, but one of these guys in a prominent role, especially now when the roster is so thin again, without the likes of Kenny Omega, without the likes of CM Punk, without the likes of Adam Cole taking these spots. It's so strange that these three men have not found a more prominent role over the last couple of months. It's shocking. It is absolutely shocking. I don't think any of these three guys have done anywhere near what they should have been able to do in AEW. Miro had his TNT run, and Malachi had his little feud with Cody. Andrade, poor Andrade. Andrade hasn't had anything. I cannot give Andrade anything. He's done nothing in his AEW career. I leave it up to you guys. I don't know. I'm very disenfranchised when I talk about this, so I won't be talking about too many negative things about AEW, but this is one of them. I gotta get this off my chest. As always, boys, thank you so much for the support. If you did enjoy today's video and you're still watching, leave a like on it. I'll see you in the next one really, really soon. Very soon, in a few days. Stay stunning.